These are attributes that are at the base of Africa's very existence. I am currently doing a study, and in a few days I'll be launching a book on Pan-Africanism, and I've gone into this, and I've seen how the issues pertaining to culture, to music, to the arts, to the drum, have been fundamental in the resilience, in building the resilience, the survival and resilience of Africans, especially during the period that has been known now as Maafa. Maafa, which is a Swahili word denoting catastrophe, that befell the African continent, and people were exported, were kidnapped on the continent, exported to the Americas, to the Caribbean, to Europe, and elsewhere. And how they survived those extreme conditions of brutality, dehumanization, and to emerge as a people reaching out to other people who are like themselves, and to form bonds that eventuated in what we call Pan-Africanism today. It's a very powerful story. People who were originally Bakongo or Wolof or Makonde or Ashanti, now finding themselves in these plantations, whether in the Caribbean or in the United States or South America, and they didn't know they were African at that moment, until their owners, the slave master, started calling them, "You African, come here." And they said, "What? I'm African now?" And they started realizing that they came from the same place, and eventually this did lead to people like W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and the others, to come together and say, and in this list there is a very eminent South African, Isaka Seme, who was a thinker at the turn of the 19th century of the Pan-Africanist movement. So the arts are very important, because for Africans, the music and the drum and the song are not just objects of entertainment. They are also a spiritual way of reconnecting with their roots, remembering who they are and what they have gone through, the suffering they have had to deal with, the way they resisted that brutal experience, how they emerged victorious until they came to where we are right now. The healing powers of our medicine man and woman in the African setting, in the black American settings in Louisiana or in Cuba or in Brazil, the new religions that were amalgams of whether it was Catholicism or Presbyterianism with the original African belief systems, and how where these created a melange of spiritualism that became powerful, and so on and so forth. These are things that we need to get our young people to study and understand better, and also to develop our own governance systems. We are talking about issues like economic development, which are very good, financial stability, and so on and so forth, stock exchanges and so on and so forth. But unless you have figured out your governance systems. All this is not going to work. Professor here is talking about the COVID experience, which is only a few years ago. But this country suffered the loss of so many vibrant young people who could have continued giving their services to this country because we had the wrong kind of leadership, which thought that this was not a problem. They called on people to go and pray and fast and be strong or something like that. Now, if you tell me a courageous, fearless Maasai Moran with his spear or the Sime is going to confront a lion, I will call him a great warrior. But if you tell me anybody can stand up and fight a virus empty-handed, I would say I'm looking at a fool. And because of that, we lost a lot of people, young people who are vibrant, strong, energetic, vital to the economy of this country because we had very bad leadership that believed in junk science and superstition. So governance comes first. Now, President Mbeki was instrumental in the foundation of the Africa peer review mechanism, APRM, which was started at the beginning of the 2000s and so on and so forth, and went around the continent where people, countries would invite experts and observers to come and look at how they are doing their thing, how they are doing their economy, how they are doing their politics, how they are doing their cultural activities, and so on and so forth, and pronounce a verdict, kind of, saying this is good, this is good, this is not so good, this is bad. And it went on for some time. And you know what the Africans did eventually? They started taking APRM as a beauty pageant, where literally they were saying, come and look at how beautiful I am, look at me, how I am, look at me when I'm dressed in my African dress and when I'm dressed in the European attire and so on and so forth. And APRM, Mr. President, I think right now is a dead letter. It's no longer effective. And I think it's gasping for oxygen. So I would make a call that we go back to the ideals that presided over the formation of things like the APRM, and maybe develop other products as well to accompany it, to make it thoroughgoing and serious, and to make Africans accept that when your neighbor is coming to look at you, he's not coming there to criticize you necessarily, but to show you where you might improve your efforts, where you may concentrate your resources, and so on and so forth. Because otherwise, all this that we are doing, all the good things that the professor has been talking about will come to naught unless they are put in the hands of people who know they are there to serve the people and not to rule over them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for provoking us once again, which is necessary. One of the things that you touched on was brain drain. So seeing our great minds moving out of the country, and I want to turn to you, Professor Shivji, please. How can we reclaim intellectual and ideological leadership on the continent? We were leading in that area. How do we reclaim that as we build the Africa we want? And then we are turning very swiftly to what are we going to do? So bridging the gap between the Africa you've put before us today, the aspiration, and where we are. Karibu.
How do we reclaim ideological and intellectual leadership? Reclaim we must. How do we do it? But let me quickly point out that in the immediate post-colonial period, both externally and internally, Africa did exercise intellectual and ideological leadership. For example, in the councils of UN, United Nations. This was a time when we had the right to development, which was pushed by Africa. We had the two international conventions, 1966, on civil and political rights and social, economic, and cultural rights, which were adopted by the United Nations. And one of the important provisions in both these conventions was right to self-determination. Right to self-determination. And that is why US refused to ratify those conventions, because they objected to the right to self-determination. We had UNCTAD, for example, as a counterpoint to the World Bank and IMF. And if you read some of the UNCTAD reports of that time, they're extremely revealing. I think it was the first or second conference of UNCTAD which was held in Algiers, where Che Guevara was present, I think Babu was present, Abdullah Muhammad Babu and so on. Then there was a very important initiative of the United Nations passing the resolution on the permanent sovereignty over natural resources. Okay? But with the whole neoliberal onslaught, these have all been lost. We lost our intellectual leadership externally and also internally. Internally, the sites of knowledge production, the sites of ideological and intellectual debates were our universities. Largely were our universities, whether it was University of Dar es Salaam or it was University of Ahmad Bello in Nigeria, or Ibadan in Nigeria, okay, Nairobi, Makerere, etc. But with the neoliberalization of our universities, there was extreme amount of repression. Today, at the University of Dar es Salaam, if the students want to organize a public lecture by President Thabo Mbeki, they will have to first get a, what we call kibali, that is a permit. Okay? This is the same university which produced immense debates in the late 60s and early 70s. Okay? So we have actually destroyed, through repression and suppression, our sites of knowledge and our sites of discussions and debates. So, in no small measure, we are to blame how we have lost intellectual leadership, simply because our rulers, yes, I won't call them leaders, our rulers cannot afford, they're so insecure, they cannot tolerate any dissident voices. They cannot tolerate critics. Okay? And this is true, not only in my country, but other countries as well. Okay? We are witnessing a very repressive regimes in Africa, all over. Now, how do we reclaim that? The other day at the university, President Thabo Mbeki was talking about agency. Of course, to reclaim this, to bring about a new awakening, resurgence, we needed agency. And I would say the first and foremost agency are working people. I think our states, you may critically engage with the states, but the states have proved a total failure with that regard. Okay? So the working people will have to take the destiny in their own hands. Of course, there will be what we call, in Gramscian terms, organic intellectuals, collaborating with the people. Okay? And when I say organic intellectuals, what do I mean? By intellectuals, I don't simply mean academia. I mean artists. I mean cultural workers. I mean journalists. I mean village and street intellectuals. Okay. And we have pockets, particularly among the youth, of these intellectuals who are prepared, in Cabral's terms, to commit suicide as petty bourgeoisie and join the people. So it is this kind of combination, which it seems to me, will be the agency for the development. And ideology. In Africa, in the African continent, I think it's the only continent where we have very powerful ideology in Pan-Africanism. It is more than a century old now. We had very powerful ideology, and political movements inspired by Pan-Africanism. Let us not forget, African nationalism was born of Pan-Africanism, not the other way around. That is why I get very upset when people talk about the example of European unity. It's not a parallel at all to Pan-Africanism. So we have a powerful ideology. How do we revive that ideology in the present context? I think that's a big challenge, but it's possible. And we have pockets of youth who are going back to Pan-African ideology.